Welcome everybody to AppleInsider. It is Andrew here, and you can find me on Twitter at Andrew_OSU. You're watching This Week in Apple, where I break down the biggest Apple news stories of the week, and we have some cool stuff to talk about regarding Apple's MacBook Pros and future iPad Pros. But before we get into the stories, what do you guys think of this new setup? Do you like this better or worse? Same studio, just shooting behind a different desk, trying things out. I want to know if you guys like this better, worse, or the same from what I was doing before. Let me know on Twitter or down below in the comments. You guys will figure it out. Let's go ahead and move into the news for this week. Before we get to the iPad Pros, which I'm personally most excited about, let's talk about MacBook Pros. This is really confirming things. We should be excited. Unlike other people who speculated that we were getting new MacBook Pros at WWDC, which we here said that it was not going to happen, we might finally be getting them Q3 of this year. Q3 of this year, a new report says that production is ramping up. It is starting for Apple's new 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros. The ones we have been waiting on. The redesigned machines with Apple's M1X or M2 processor inside, of the one with the return of the ports, the ones with MagSafe, the ones we are very, very excited to get our hands on, look to finally be coming in Q3. This is what we had heard before, but now that we see production ramping up to support that, it's just more kind of confirming that belief that these new MacBook Pros are actually coming this year and very soon. I mean, Gurman said, I believe it was Gurman, could have been Prosser, but that they would be coming out as early as this summer. This summer is not, it was barely dubbed up, so it can still go into Q3, still go into later in this year, so it's still possible. Summer, Q3, something along those lines. But MacBook Pros, they're coming very, very soon. MacBook Pros aside, let's talk about iPad Pros. We have a lot of cool things. So starting off with the very vague and getting to the more specific details here. So Gurman, he was talking on his Power On podcast about future iPad Pros and that Apple's actually in development of larger screen devices. I think this is very curious and really aligns with where the iPad line should be going. Apple has kept the 12.9-inch model around for years. This is the 5th generation of a 12.9-inch iPad Pro. So if Apple is really trying to offer the iPad as a Mac replacement, why aren't there larger screen sizes than a 13-inch? That's why it definitely makes sense for Apple to be investigating larger screen devices. Gurman didn't say what size screen. I mean, they're just researching it, developing them. They're playing around. There is no concrete size or anything yet, and these are still years away from being introduced. But it is interesting, and it does align with where I would see the iPad Pro line going. You could still carry a 16-inch iPad Pro around with you. There's no reason that can't still slide into your backpack just as easily as a 16-inch MacBook Pro could. So it makes sense for Apple to be looking at these larger sizes, and I'm very excited by that, even though we're going to have to wait quite a while before we see them. Another report is saying we finally may get those OLED displays on the iPad Pro, and 2023 may be that year. The report says that iPad, in the report, everything was labeled as iPad and just goes by screen size. But based on screen size, it looks like the iPad Air will actually get the OLED display first in 2022, before coming to the iPad Pros in 2023. This isn't the first time that Apple has given something to the iPad Air before going to the iPad Pros. We technically saw that, beefed up iPad Air 4th generation ahead of the iPad Pros that had faster single-core scores. For most daily tasks, the iPad Air was faster than the iPad Pro because it had the A12Z Bionic processor, which didn't really change all that much, just more graphically capable. So it makes sense that Apple could do that. We did see a new mini LED display on the 12.9-inch iPad Pros, so I would not be surprised if we saw Apple coming out with OLED on iPad Air before coming to the iPad Pros. So 2022 for iPad Air and 2023 for iPad Pro. Let's talk about processors, and I hope this isn't dry for you, so just please stick with me. This could have some big ramifications for Apple's devices. But right now, Apple is using a 5nm process for its A-series chip in the iPhone 12 line. That debuted in 2020, and it looks like next year, for the 2022 iPad Pros, Apple will be moving to a 3nm process. Now, TSMC, who makes a lot of Apple's processors, they say that a 3nm process could increase performance by 15%, but cut power draw by 30%, which is pretty huge. 15% more powerful while drawing 30% less power. Like, that's exactly what we want to see on all of our portable devices. Mac, iPhone, iPad. Just more power, less power draw. Like, that's exactly what we want. So it looks like the new 2022 iPad Pros could utilize this 3nm process. The iPhone 14, though, which still expected to come out in 2022 at the end of the year, that looks to still be using a 4nm process. The report says it's just due to scheduling, but we could still see Apple using 4nm for the iPhone, while the iPad Pros are getting that 3nm process. Maybe it's just demand. Maybe there's less demand for the iPad Pros versus iPhone, and Apple doesn't have to make as many. Could be something like that, or just how they're working on building their stuff up. If iPad Pros are using the same kind of design, whereas the iPhones maybe seeing more of a redesign, it could be why Apple needs to be ready earlier, despite the devices debuting later. Regardless, Apple could be seeing this new process debuting on iPad Pros first in 2022. Okay, we've got 2 rumors to touch on, and then 1 news item. First rumor, AirPods. We've already been hearing a lot about AirPods, and that is that they're going to have a new version of the regular AirPods that have an AirPods Pro kind of design without the ANC and noise canceling coming later this year in 2021, and then a new version of AirPods Pro would come out next year in 2022. This report doubles down on that, and it is saying again, we are going to get a new version of AirPods Pro in 2022. I'm really excited about that. I love my AirPods Pro, and I think Apple could do some cool stuff with them. It's been a year or so since these have come out, so we're due for a refresh next year. I think that timeline makes sense. It lines up, and the AirPods Pro, or the AirPods debuting first, makes sense because those are the more popular option. Most people pick up AirPods. They are cheaper. So Apple has a better design, better audio quality, more seal on them, all that kind of stuff coming to a new version of AirPods. I think that's only going to be a good thing for the vast majority of people. But for those of us that are sticking out for AirPods Pro, 2022 looks to be our target date. And finally here, everyone got their salt pills. Everyone grab your salt pills and just hold this in your mouth because we're talking about AirPower again. Despite the project having been officially canceled by Apple, a new report, or I guess not a report, but a new patent shows that Apple is still working on it. A recent patent filed by Apple shows how Apple can cope with a device placed on a wireless charging mat and move around and continuing to receive a charge. Essentially kind of what Apple was doing with AirPower. So even though it canceled the project publicly, it's still developing it. This doesn't mean we're going to actually get a product or where this will show up in any of Apple's products, whether it's something that they incorporate into their iPhones or into a wireless charging mat of their own. I don't know at this point, and I don't expect Apple to necessarily release a new version of AirPower, but what we do know is Apple is still working on it in some capacity. They're still developing wireless charging tech for wireless charging mats and filing patents on it. So we don't know where that's going to lie or where it's going to end up, but it means Apple is still working on it in some capacity. Okay, I got 1 news item to tell you guys about that I'm pretty excited for, which is Apple's public betas are here. So if you've been wanting to test Apple's new software, you can now officially do so without being a part of Apple's developer program. By heading to apple.com/beta, you can sign up, register, and enroll your devices, and you can test out iOS 15, iPadOS 15, tvOS 15, watchOS 8, and macOS Monterey. You can do this on your own devices. Not saying that's a good thing to do, but if you want to do it, you now can because Apple has issued its first public betas of its upcoming software. I did a whole video on it a couple days ago on how you can install them yourself, so go back and watch that if you want to get like kind of nitty-gritty details, and check out all of my deep dives where I go through a bunch of the new features, stuff with HomeKit and CarPlay and files and messages and all sorts of stuff that's going on with these updates. So go check those out as well, whether you've upgraded and you want to see what's new, or whether you're still holding out and you just want to kind of live vicariously through me in me taking the burden of installing the updates on my devices. Anyway, let me know again what you guys think about the new set. Are you guys excited for new iPad Pros and MacBook Pros? Let me know over on Twitter at Andrew_OSU, and stay tuned for many, many more videos.